Welcome to Books in 10. Remember, we're raffling an iPhone when we reach 10,000 subscribers. Like, subscribe, and journey with us into this fantastic book.
Oh, yeah.
Share with your friends, and let's create the biggest book community on YouTube together.
Yeah, let's do it.
Oh, there's a link to purchase the book in the pinned comments. Enjoy.
Very cool.
We are accepting book requests to create content within. Suggest the best titles in the comments. Now let's go. Today, we're diving deep into Leo Tolstoy's The Death of Ivan Ilych,
Right.
using the Louise and Elmer Maud translation from Global Gray eBooks.
The Death of Ivan Ilych, a novella that punches way above its weight, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. It's not exactly like light beach reading, but
Right.
Tolstoy really packs a punch in this one.
Yeah.
I mean, he tackles some of life's biggest questions.
Big questions. Yeah.
Life, death, meaning, all within the framework of what seems like an ordinary guy's life.
And that's the genius of it, isn't it? Tolstoy takes this seemingly average guy, Ivan Ilych, a successful judge in 19th century Russia, and he uses him as a lens to explore these universal human experiences. You know, on the surface, Ivan has everything society tells us we should want. A successful career, a family, social standing, but right from the start, Tolstoy hints at a certain hollowness beneath the surface.
Yes, I felt that right away.
Yeah.
He's going through the motions of a successful life,
Yeah.
but there's this nagging sense that something's just off.
Yeah.
Like he's playing a
The part, yeah.
but doesn't really know who he's underneath.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where the historical context comes in. Remember, 19th century Russia was a society steeped in tradition, social hierarchy, and a very rigid set of expectations about how one should live. Success was measured by outward achievements and conformity to these social norms. So even though Ivan outwardly appears to be living the right kind of life, Tolstoy is subtly critiquing the shallowness and potential emptiness of this kind of existence.
Okay, so we have this guy, Ivan Ilych, who's basically achieved everything he's supposed to achieve,
Right.
but he's not happy. Then comes the turning point of the story, and it's so unexpected, and yet so mundane at the same time.
Yes, the infamous fall while hanging curtains. It seems so trivial, almost comical. But in Tolstoy's hands, this seemingly insignificant incident becomes the catalyst for Ivan's entire existential crisis.
It's like that fall cracks open his carefully constructed facade and forces him to confront his own vulnerability, his mortality.
Yeah.
Suddenly, all those things he thought were important, his career, his social standing,
Right.
all seem to fade into the background as he grapples with this persistent pain in his side.
It's a brilliant literary device. The fall itself is a metaphor for the way life can suddenly throw us off balance, how even the smallest incident can shatter our illusions of control and force us to confront the fragility of our existence. And what's fascinating is how Ivan responds to this pain. It's not just a physical discomfort, it triggers a cascade of denial, anger, and fear.
Yes. He goes through this whole ordeal of doctor visits, diagnoses, and treatments,
Yeah.
but it's like no one can really tell him what's wrong or how to fix it.
Right.
And the more he seeks answers, the more frustrated and isolated he becomes.
And this is where Tolstoy's critique of the medical profession of the time comes in.
Okay.
He portrays the doctors as being more concerned with appearances and jargon than with truly understanding and addressing Ivan's suffering. They're almost like actors, playing their parts in a societal drama that avoids confronting the reality of death head on.
You know, reading those scenes,
Yeah.
I couldn't help but think about how often we still avoid talking about death in our own society.
It's true.
It's like this taboo subject that we dance around with euphemisms and platitudes,
Absolutely.
and that avoidance just makes it even harder to grapple with when it does inevitably come up.
Absolutely. And that avoidance is what makes Ivan's experience so relatable, even over a century later. He's surrounded by people, his wife, his colleagues, even his children, but none of them can truly connect with him in his suffering.
It's like they're all caught up in the same performance, the same societal script that dictates how one should behave in the face of illness and death. And the only person who offers him genuine compassion is Gerasim, a simple peasant who serves as his assistant.
Gerasim. Such a powerful and poignant character. He's the one who isn't afraid to acknowledge the reality of Ivan's condition. He sees his pain, his fear, and he responds with simple acts of kindness and care. He sits with Ivan, holds his legs, listens to him without judgment.
And it's in those moments with Gerasim that Ivan experiences a glimmer of genuine human connection. It's not about social standing or intellectual prowess. It's about basic human empathy and the the willingness to simply be present with someone they're suffering.
And that contrast between the superficiality of Ivan's interactions with his family and colleagues
Yeah.
and the genuine compassion of Gerasim really highlights Tolstoy's message about the importance of authentic connection. It's a powerful reminder that true solace often comes from the most unexpected places, not from those who are supposed to provide it.
So we have Ivan physically declining,
Right.
increasingly isolated,
Mm-hmm.
and grappling with the realization that his life might not have been what he thought it was.
Yeah,
And this all culminates in a full-blown existential crisis.
exactly.
She starts questioning everything.
Yeah.
His career, his relationships, the choices he's made, the very correctness of the life he's built.
Yes. And this is where the death of Ivan Ilych moves beyond a simple story about a man dying and becomes a profound exploration of what it means to truly live.
Wow.
Facing his own mortality, Ivan is forced to strip away all the external trappings of success and confront the deeper questions about meaning and purpose.
Yeah.
And what he discovers is deeply unsettling.
He realizes that he spent his life chasing after things that ultimately don't matter.
It's true.
He sought validation from others, climbed the social ladder, accumulated possessions. But he's never stopped to ask himself what truly gives his life meaning.
Hmm.
And as he faces the end, he's filled with a sense of profound regret and emptiness.
It's a powerful and uncomfortable truth that Tolstoy forces us to confront.
Yeah.
We can spend our lives building something we think is important, only to realize at the very end that we've been building the wrong thing. And what's so brilliant about Tolstoy is that he doesn't offer any easy answers. He doesn't tell us what the right way to live is.
Right.
Instead, he presents us with Ivan's struggle and invites us to examine our own lives in light of it.
You know, reading this book really made me stop and think about my own priorities, my own definition of success. Am I chasing after the same hollow goals that Ivan Illich spent his life pursuing?
That's the question.
Yeah.
That's the question.
It's a question that lingers long after you finish the book.
And that's the mark of great literature, isn't it? It doesn't just entertain us. It challenges us, provokes us to think differently about ourselves and the world around us. And the death of Ivan Illich certainly does that. But before we get too deep into our own existential crises, I think it's time to move on to part 2 of our deep dive
Okay, yeah.
and explore how Ivan's journey unfolds from here.
Absolutely. Stay tuned because we'll be back after a short break to unpack even more of Tolstoy's brilliant insights.
And we'll delve into some of the more hopeful aspects of the story because even in the face of death, Tolstoy offers us a glimmer of redemption and the possibility of finding meaning and peace. What's fascinating about Ivan Illich's story is that it's not just about facing death, it's about facing the truth of one's life.
And that can be even more terrifying than death itself, can't it? And imagine coming to the end and realizing you haven't truly lived.
Exactly. Ivan Illich clung to the idea that he'd lived correctly, following societal norms and expectations. But as he grapples with his mortality, that facade crumbles. He sees the emptiness of a life focused on external validation and material possessions.
There's this one scene where he's looking at his newly decorated drawing room, the one he put so much effort into, and it suddenly seems ridiculous to him.
It's a moment of stark realization. He sacrificed his health, his time, his relationships for this thing, this symbol of status and success. And now, facing death, it all feels meaningless. Tolstoy really drives this point home through a powerful literary technique called defamiliarization.
Okay.
He takes these everyday objects like the drawing room furniture and presents them in a new light, making Ivan and the reader see them as absurd and meaningless.
So even the way Tolstoy describes the setting helps to reveal Ivan's internal state.
Precisely. And what's even more tragic is that the people around him are still caught up in that same game. They're more concerned with appearances, with maintaining social decorum, than with truly connecting with him in his suffering.
Tolstoy is so masterful at capturing the absurdity of social conventions in the face of death. We see this in the way Ivan Illich's colleagues treat him, offering hollow condolences and making light of his condition. They can't handle the truth of his decline, so they resort to platitudes and distractions.
Precisely. They distance themselves from Ivan Illich, not out of malice, but out of their own inability to confront their mortality. And this, of course, only deepens Ivan Illich's sense of isolation. It's like everyone around him is speaking a language he no longer understands, a language of pretense and denial.
And it's in that isolation that he finally starts to see things clearly.
Yeah.
He strips away the layers of pretense and confronts the reality of his life and his impending death. He begins to see through the hypocrisy of the society he's always tried to fit into.
What's remarkable is that in those final moments of clarity, Ivan Illich doesn't turn bitter or resentful. Instead, he finds a new kind of strength, a strength born of acceptance and compassion.
He focuses on the people he loves, on offering them comfort and seeking their forgiveness. It's a beautiful and heartbreaking transformation.
And it speaks to the power of forgiveness, both of ourselves and of others.
Yeah.
Ivan Illich realizes that he can't change the past, but he can choose how he faces the end. And in that choice, he finds a measure of redemption. He finds a way to break free from the societal constraints that have bound him for so long.
But what about the spiritual aspect of this story? I mean, Tolstoy was deeply religious, and that certainly comes through in the Death of Ivan Ilych. How does that play into Ivan's journey?
It's a complex element, for sure. While Ivan Illich goes through the motions of religious rituals, like taking communion, it doesn't bring him true solace at first.
He even describes it as another form of deception, something done for the sake of appearances rather than genuine faith.
Exactly. But as his physical suffering intensifies, so does his spiritual yearning. He grapples with the meaning of life, with the possibility of an afterlife, with the question of why he's been made to suffer. He's wrestling with some of the biggest questions humanity has ever faced.
And Tolstoy doesn't shy away from depicting the rawness of this struggle. Ivan Illich doesn't experience a sudden Hollywood-style epiphany. It's messy, it's full of doubt and anger, but ultimately it's through this struggle that he begins to find a kind of peace.
It's a gradual process of letting go, of surrendering to the unknown. And it's in that surrender that Ivan Illich finally experiences a sense of peace and even joy.
It's a powerful reminder that faith isn't about clinging to dogma or ritual, but about finding meaning and solace in the face of life's biggest questions, even when there are no easy answers.
And Tolstoy doesn't shy away from the darker side of faith either. Ivan Illich wrestles with anger and despair, questioning the justice of his suffering. He rails against God, demanding an explanation for the pain he's enduring.
Which is so relatable, isn't it? I mean, who hasn't questioned why bad things happen, why we're forced to endure pain and loss?
It's a raw and honest exploration of the spiritual struggle, the doubt and questioning that can accompany faith. And it's through that struggle that Ivan Illich ultimately arrives at a place of acceptance.
And it's not a passive acceptance, but an active one, born of compassion and a desire to ease the suffering of those around him.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful testament to the transformative power of love and forgiveness, even in the face of death.
And it's a testament to the power of literature to explore these profound questions, to challenge our assumptions, and to help us make sense of our own lives, even amidst the pain and uncertainty. You know, some literary critics argue that this shift in Ivan Illich represents a kind of death and rebirth experience, a symbolic resurrection that allows him to finally break free from the shackles of societal expectations and embrace a more authentic way of being.
It's like he's dying to his old self, the self that was defined by external validation and social status, and being reborn into a new self, a self that finds meaning in compassion, connection, and love.
Exactly. And that transformation, that journey from darkness to light, is what makes The Death of Ivan Illich such a powerful and enduring work of literature. But I think we've given our listeners a lot to chew on in this part. Shall we take a break and come back to unpack the final moments of Ivan's journey?
Let's do it. We'll be back in a flash to explore how Ivan Illich ultimately finds peace and what Tolstoy might be suggesting about the true meaning of a good life. Welcome back to our deep dive into The Death of Ivan Illich. I don't know about you, but I'm still reeling from the emotional intensity of Ivan's journey so far.
Yeah,
It's amazing how Tolstoy manages to pack so much depth into such a short work.
it is truly remarkable. And as we move into the final part of our discussion, I want to focus on a few key details that Tolstoy uses to highlight Ivan Illich's transformation.
Okay.
We've already touched upon the significance of Gerson's compassion, but there are other seemingly minor details that take on a profound meaning upon closer examination.
Oh, I love when that happens in a book.
Yeah.
Like when you suddenly realize that a seemingly insignificant object or interaction was actually foreshadowing something much larger.
Exactly. And one detail that stands out to me is the description of the pink cretonne fabric in Ivan's drawing room. Remember, he meticulously chose this fabric with green leaves on it for his new furniture.
Yes. I remember thinking it was a bit of an odd detail at the time. Like, what's the significance of that?
Well, on the surface, it represents Ivan Illich's preoccupation with appearances, his desire to conform to the tastes of his social circle. He wants to impress people with his elegant and fashionable home.
So it's another example of Ivan trying to keep up appearances, even when it comes to something as um, seemingly insignificant as the fabric on his furniture.
Precisely. But on a deeper level, the pink cretonne points to the artificiality of the life he's built. It symbolizes his focus on material possessions and superficiality rather than genuine connection and meaning. He's surrounded himself with these beautiful things, but they provide him with no real comfort or joy.
It's like those meticulously chosen furnishings become a physical representation of the emotional emptiness Ivan feels inside.
Exactly. And remember how easily Ivan Illich would get irritated by the smallest imperfections in his carefully curated home?
Yeah.
A stain on the tablecloth, a broken window blind string.
Oh, yes.
These things would drive him to distraction.
I remember thinking that his reaction seemed way out of proportion to the actual problem.
And that's precisely Tolstoy's point. His irritability over these trivial matters is a symptom of his deeper spiritual unease.
Hmm.
He's created this perfect facade of a life, but it can't mask the growing sense of emptiness and dissatisfaction he feels within.
Wow, that's such a powerful insight.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder what kind of pink cretonne we might be clinging to in our own lives.
Right. What seemingly insignificant details have we allowed to become outsized sources of stress and anxiety?
Yeah.
Are we focusing on the wrong things, chasing after external validation instead of cultivating true inner peace and contentment?
Okay, so we've talked about the themes of death, isolation, the search for meaning, and the symbolism of the pink cretonne.
Right.
But there's also this persistent theme of compassion that keeps emerging throughout the story.
Yeah.
It's most evident in Gerasim's character, but it also manifests in Ivan Illich's own transformation as he nears death.
Absolutely. And that's one of the most beautiful and hopeful aspects of this novella. Despite all the pain, despair, and disillusionment, there's this glimmer of redemption in Ivan Illich's capacity for compassion, even in his final moments.
Yeah, even as he's physically deteriorating, he starts to see beyond his own suffering and recognize the pain of those around him. He reaches out to his son, seeking connection and forgiveness. He tries to comfort his wife, even though their relationship has been strained for years.
And those small acts of kindness, of reaching out and offering comfort, become incredibly powerful in the context of his impending death. It's as if he's finally breaking free from the self-centeredness that has defined much of his life and embracing a deeper sense of empathy and connection.
It's a beautiful testament to the transformative power of compassion. Even in the face of death, Ivan Illich finds a way to transcend his own ego and find meaning in alleviating the suffering of others.
And Tolstoy seems to be suggesting that this shift towards compassion, towards recognizing our shared humanity and interconnectedness, is ultimately what leads to true peace and fulfillment. It's not about achieving worldly success or accumulating material possessions, but about cultivating a heart that is open to love, forgiveness, and connection.
So even though the death of Ivan Illich is a story about death, it's ultimately a story about life. It's about how we choose to live, how we relate to others, and what truly matters in the end.
Precisely. And while Tolstoy doesn't offer us a simple roadmap to a good life, he provides us with a powerful and thought-provoking meditation on the things that truly matter. Compassion, authenticity, and the courage to confront the difficult questions about meaning and purpose.
This has been such a rich and insightful conversation. I feel like I've gained a whole new appreciation for the death of Ivan Illich and for Tolstoy's genius.
Me too. It's a novella that stays with you long after you finish reading it, and I hope our deep dive has encouraged our listeners to revisit this powerful work and explore its themes in more depth.
Absolutely. And for those of you who haven't read The Death of Ivan Illich yet, we highly recommend adding it to your reading list. It's a short but incredibly powerful read that will challenge you to think deeply about your own life and what truly matters.
And as we wrap up our deep dive, we want to leave you with one final thought. Don't wait until you're on your deathbed to start living a life that is true to yourself and filled with meaning. Embrace compassion, seek genuine connection, and never stop questioning what truly matters. Because, as Tolstoy so brilliantly demonstrates, the time to start living is now.
Thank you for joining us on this journey into the death of Ivan Illich. We'd love to hear your thoughts and reflections on this powerful work, so feel free to leave a comment below and let's continue the conversation.
Until next time, happy reading.